Retail media networks are one of the fastest growing categories in digital advertising. Today, I'm going to address some of the challenges that retail media networks face when dealing with yield management and specifically compare them against traditional digital media publishers. In what is probably not YouTube best practice, I'm going to say that if you already know what a retail media network is, you can skip the next 90 seconds. And if you are already running a yield management team at a retail media network, go ahead and skip the first 3 minutes or so to the point where I get to the major four contrasts between traditional digital publishers and retail media networks. Before you do, if you're getting value out of this content, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button to make sure that you're up to date with all my latest content. Firstly, we have to do a definition, and I'm going to use the term retail media network, or RMN, interchangeably with the term commerce media network. It is basically any business that has traditionally sold a product to its customers and is now advertising products that aren't its own to its customers. So some of the best known examples of retail media networks include companies like Amazon and Walmart. And in the case of Amazon, they have developed their own ad tech, including a DSP, that allows them to serve ads on behalf of their customers. Usually, an RMN will deliver ads on its own properties and potentially also deliver onto other partner properties. Usually, they will focus on partner companies that they have existing relationships with, and these are referred to as endemic advertisers. They may also allow other advertisers who aren't existing customers to advertise, and this would be referred to as non-endemic. So I mentioned Amazon and Walmart, but you also see companies like Marriott and United Airlines creating their own retail media networks. So before we get into the intricacies of driving yield, we have to ask ourselves, why are retail media networks growing so quickly? The first reason is that RMNs are viewed as a profitable business. If you think about traditional retailers like Walmart, in many cases their margins are really low. So advertising allows them the potential for a new revenue stream. That very profitability may be compelling in its own right. The second reason is that they get to use existing assets. The retailer already has a website that exists for their customers, and it just needs a little bit of repurposing to extend into advertising. The third is they potentially have a large advertiser base in their existing retail partners, and this is frankly an amazing asset. The fourth is they potentially have very good data. They have all the transaction data from customers on their website, who bought and for how much. And most importantly, the majority of the users on their website or in their apps will be logged in. As consumers get more and more sensitive about privacy, the relative value of this data continues to increase. And finally, and most importantly, retail media networks have the ability to calculate return on ad spend directly for their partners if they are transacting on the site or in the app. And this is huge. For most publishers, they have to try to get performance numbers back from their advertisers. In the case of programmatic, this can be almost impossible depending on the ad serving setup. Retail media networks, on the other hand, have direct insight into what is working and what isn't working in terms of the advertiser performance for their partners. So if that's why they're doing it, what are the challenges that they face or things that are unique about a retail media network that create challenges from a yield management perspective? The first is organizational challenges. With the exception of the very largest retail media networks, they aren't that big and they haven't been around that long. They have been created within organizations that have an existing retail mindset. They don't just have a whole pool of ad tech people sitting around ready to jump on any problems that they have. They may not even have a yield management team. In contrast to large digital media publishers like Meta or Google, or even a digital publisher like Yahoo. In these companies, advertising is a huge business, and they have large teams and well-established processes. And they either have a yield management team, or they have decentralized teams that essentially play that role, potentially in the form of a product management organization. So what do I recommend that a retail media network do? The two things they need to focus on is, one is get a yield management team, or at least get some people to play this role. This isn't a sales role, it isn't a finance role, and for reasons why, see one of my other videos, but you need basic processes like a deal desk and business intelligence reporting on advertising. And the second core capability that I often see lacking is you need a really capable head of ad operations. Someone who's been in the industry for a long time and is used to the complexity of different ad stacks and the challenges that come with programmatic buying. All right, let's get to the second challenge. Another challenge is simply the relatively low volume of impressions that these retail media networks own on their own site or in their own apps. The users that come to their site are extremely valuable, but the number of daily users that come to the sites compared to a relatively large site like a Yahoo or a CNN is going to be tiny. And this can be a major problem. It can potentially cap the effectiveness of advertising. So what is the right response? You need a way to expand your reach. You need to find off-network or off-site traffic that you don't own. But there is a big decision point here that I'm going to not have time for in this video. I may run a separate one. And that is, if you're a retail media network, what kind of ad network are you going to run? Specifically, are you going to run a blind ad network or a transparent ad network? At the extremes, a transparent ad network is where you tell your advertisers exactly where they are running and they see the fees for buying off network. And the blind ad network is the opposite. That's where you're not telling the advertisers the fees. They just pay you the money and you're responsible for acquiring traffic that meets their needs. This is potentially more profitable for a retail media network, but also then places the burden on the retail media network to acquire inventory that performs. This is such a big topic again that I may just create a separate video. But to be clear, both models exist right now and both are used effectively by some of the biggest retail media networks. The third challenge is that the primary advertisers are the customers of the retail media networks, which, as I mentioned, can be a great thing, but it can also be a challenge if those advertisers aren't happy and aren't seeing the return on ad spend that they need. In a traditional digital publisher role, the yield team's job is to make the most money possible off the ad inventory available. They may be focused on getting up the revenue per page or the CPM in the individual ads up. And although no publisher would use the words that I'm about to use, they are all trying to squeeze as much value out of the advertiser as possible. There is an implicit assumption that if an advertiser is unhappy, there is another advertiser who is ready to take their place. And this is particularly true in a programmatic environment where everything is auction-based and you can see exactly who's ready to buy the impression if the primary winner didn't win it. In retail media networks, in contrast, they are working with their partners and they can't just assume that all advertisers are equal. They need their advertisers to be happy. Retail media networks have to have their partners be successful and they have to see that those partners are getting good ROI on their ad campaigns. And that's why I call out here that ROAS, or return on ad spend, is more important than the RPM on the page. In other words, your customer's performance is more important than your page level monetization, at least in the short term. And again, a call out to another video I did just a few weeks ago on the definition of ROAS. It's critically important here to think about ROAS versus incremental ROAS versus incremental margin. So what is the yield management implication? You need to pay more attention to your endemic customers than your programmatic non-endemic customers. Well, that's kind of obvious. So what does that mean? You may check in with them on the kind of campaign performance that they're seeing in ways that a traditional publisher would not. You might also allow them better pricing or more discounts or more bonus inventory than your non-endemic advertisers. You're probably going to have quarterly check-ins with them that is much more substantial than a publisher would have with a regular advertiser. Let's get to the fourth challenge. The fourth challenge is that the existing website structure may not use traditional advertising sizes and placements. The merchandising arm of the retailer, in other words, the people who actually use the website to sell the company's primary products, makes the final decisions. In general, that means that the advertising function is a secondary concern. So what should the yield team be advocating for? First is easy buying, and by that I mean the ability to create campaigns and see the results. It also includes advocating for ad sizes that can be used across other sites, even potentially on competitors, so that it is easy for your advertiser to reuse existing creative assets that the advertiser is using with your other partners. And when I say easy buying, the one thing that you may have to do is copy your competitors and try not to be unique, which is an interesting concept because everybody wants to be unique and differentiated. But unless you're one of the largest retail media networks, in general, you don't want to be unique. You want to be using the same types of methodologies and techniques that are becoming standard for retail media networks. The ease of buying idea also includes keeping the deals simple. When publishers work with large advertisers or holding companies, sometimes the deals get really complicated. In a retail media network, the advertising relationship will only be one component of the broader relationship between the two companies. So it's important to keep it as simple as possible. If you are someone who is moving from a traditional publisher yield management team into a retail media network, there is only one thing I can leave you with, and that is the mindset change that you have to go from, which is treating advertisers as a demand source into a mindset of more direct partnership with your advertising partners. If you think that I've forgotten any of the major differences between a retail media network and a traditional publisher yield team, please go ahead and comment in the comments below on YouTube. I promise you I will read every one of them. Thanks for watching.